Hi everyone! Every year the films that hit the big screen are even more colorful, high quality, and simply better than the year before. The geniuses of the movie industry completely transport viewers to other worlds that are simply amazing. Which makes you think, how do they do it? To answer this question, we decided to check out the sets of some new films to see it all with our own eyes. Do you want to join us? Great! Let's go! Fantastic Beasts: The Crime of Grindelwald. The second film following the adventures of Newt Scamander and his magical beasts was shot almost entirely at the Warner Brothers studio, which has been the home of J.K. Rowling's Wizarding World for almost 20 years. The team behind the film worked incredibly hard. The Grindelwald escape scene, for example, took the combined efforts of the special effects, visual effects, and stunt teams. It was one of the most difficult scenes to film because it involved a lot of moving objects. The characters fly over New York at night through heavy rain and lightning in a lacquer-painted black carriage. According to the producers of the film, the reflection of everything that was on set could be seen on the side of the freshly painted carriage. And do you remember the revolving bookcases in the French Ministry of Magic? They only used 3 bookcase-shaped gadgets that can be moved in different directions, and then the visual effects artists come in to multiply the amount of bookcases on screen and make them move around. However, some of the interior and full-scale shots of Hogwarts were done at the historic site of Lacock Abbey, built in 1229. Yes, that one will be familiar to all the fans and everybody who has ever seen Harry Potter. The original design and decor of the building has not changed, but much of the original structure had not been preserved, so some of it had to be reconstructed. The Great Hall, on the other hand, was too large to build from the ground up for the sake of a film set. Therefore, it was recreated digitally. Christopher Robin, the Disney movie about the adventures of the grown-up hero of Alan Milne's stories and his childhood toys, was released everywhere in August of 2018. But the audience was already won over even by the trailer that showed the charming stuffed animals. This isn't surprising, because when the toy characters from a familiar childhood cartoon suddenly come to life in a live-action film, it's impossible not to feel something. The plot of the film is nothing out of the ordinary. Christopher Robin, a young boy who got to spend his childhood having adventures with Winnie the Pooh in the 100-acre woods, grew up and stopped believing in fairy tales. However, Winnie the Pooh and his friends make an unexpected return to Christopher's life to remind him what is really important and help him to look at the world through the eyes of a child again. Filming took place at Shepperton Studios near London and at various locations all over the UK. In total, 17 locations were used, including the streets of London and the motorway. Thanks to a team of set and costume designers, the locations were realistically transformed into the streets of 1949. The cinematographer, Matthias Koenig-Schweizer, decided to shoot on traditional moving cameras so that the movement of the stuffed animals looked more realistic. These characters were then animated in post-production and inserted into the mid-century London as well as the natural countryside locations. The stuffed animals themselves were created by a visual effects team from the company Animates Extras, so that the actors themselves would have something to follow on set. A lot of care and love went into making them, and it was worth it. Isle of Dogs. The animated film from American director Wes Anderson is the 13th highest grossing stop-motion animated movie. It received critical acclaim for following Japanese cinematic tradition and its unique atmosphere. Wes Anderson strives to make his animated films look as if it was live action, and this is incredibly difficult. To achieve maximum focus, the puppet and foreground are shot against a green screen, and then background shots are taken without the puppet. When the two shots are put together in one frame, so the process doubles the amount of images needed. All of this comes together to make a feature-length film with impressive puppet animation. Not to mention the need to keep the set crystal clean, as a stop-motion animation is made frame by frame with a series of photographs. A single speck of dust on the lens can be a serious problem, slowing down the already meticulous editing process. In order to correctly imitate the way dogs move, the team behind the project attached cameras to real-life dogs, and the animators studied the footage, trying to replicate it in the movie. In total, it took 2 years and 3 months to create Isle of Dogs, but the result was definitely worth all of the hard work. Don't you agree? Mission Impossible: Fallout. If you don't follow Tom Cruise's career very closely, then you might be a bit confused about what kind of mission this is exactly. Don't worry, we'll tell you. Number 6. That's right. Ethan Hunt has been fighting evil and pulling up dizzying stunts for 6 whole films already.
Go, 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 go! What are you waiting for? I'm jumping out a window!
It's worth mentioning that Tom Cruise trained for more than a year so that he would be able to perform his own stunts. He even learned how to fly a helicopter to a professional standard to minimize the need for special effects and green screens in his scenes. During the scenes with Tom in a helicopter, he was joined neither by a pilot nor by a cameraman. The cameras were mounted inside and outside of the helicopter on special racks. Even a simple at first sight scene like a motorcycle chase through the center of Paris took a lot of work. To film the scene, the crew had to shut down some of Paris's most popular tourist spots. 70 stunt drivers performed in the scene with crews waving between their cars on a motorcycle without a helmet. The slightest mistake could have led to a disaster, but luckily, everything went as planned. That's not to say that Tom didn't sustain any injuries. Cruise broke his ankle while filming a rooftop chase. He was being filmed from 4 angles at the time, so he got back up and tried to run out of the frame on his injured leg. He fell to the ground only when he was already out of shot. Fortunately, thanks to the efforts of the medical staff and Cruise himself, he was able to return to set in 6 weeks, and the filming was completed on time. Aquaman. 50 sets were created for the filming of Aquaman, including small sets and truly grandiose sets such as the throne room of Atlantis. All of these sets were created at Village Road Show Studios. Despite the widespread use of chroma key that we're used to seeing in comic book movies, the director shot many of the scenes live, sometimes even lowering the entire set down into the water. For example, one of the largest underwater sets was a completely submerged galleon ship, which was almost completely covered in algae and shellfish. Even with the help of computer graphics, there were, of course, many things to consider. Throughout the film, the audience sees 7 underwater kingdoms that the actors had to enter, starting the scene in a dry room. Although, at the same time, it must look as if it was shot underwater. And this is not an easy problem to overcome. With gravity, the laws of physics and lighting to consider, it took a lot of work. Everything down to the way the characters swim had to be thought through, so that it would loom as natural as possible. As a solution, they built special cranes to control the actors' movement in the water. Mortal Engines. Filming for the movie Mortal Engines began on the 20th of March 2017. Everything was filmed at Stone Street Studios in Darlington, New Zealand. A team of around 1,000 people worked on the project. Not a bad team. The designers came up with a total of 70 different sets. Some of the sets were created completely by the crew, while others were only part of the interior or exterior, with the rest of the set being filled in digitally with the use of chroma key. Although none of the scenes were completely digital, this made it easier for the actors to immerse themselves in the futuristic landscape. By the way, in the source material, the Mortal Engines universe had more of a Victorian steampunk aesthetic, but in the on-screen adaptation, it was modernized and the team brought in some of their own ideas. The result is quite an interesting film with visual effects noted by many critics. I Am Legend. The film was released in 2007 and was an instant hit. The protagonist, Robert Neville, played by Will Smith, is a U.S. Army virologist.
6 billion people on Earth when the infection hit. I'm a survivor living in New York City.
The story takes place in New York in the aftermath of a virus outbreak that was originally created to cure cancer. The virus wiped out most of humanity, leaving Neville as the sole surviving human being in New York. One of the most memorable scenes was Will Smith's struggle with a rabid dog that had been infected with the virus. This dog, however, was nothing more than a man in a green suit holding a scary-looking puppet, while Smith was convincingly fighting with a puppet. Indeed, about $40 million of the film's $150 million budget was spent on CGI. Ghost in the Shell. The adaptation of Masamune Shirow's science fiction manga was shot primarily in Wellington, New Zealand, as well as in Hong Kong and Shanghai. The result is a loosely East Asian futuristic metropolis with some Western and Arabic influence. People flock to this city from all over the world, and this mix of cultures is reflected in the street's advertisements. Wellington was chosen as it has so many outstanding film studios, as well as post-production studios, and everything else to do with the movie industry. Yep, hi Peter Jackson. However, it's not only the futuristic imagery in the film that's worthy of attention. It is also worth pointing out that the costumes, in particular, the Ghost in the Shell, played by Scarlett Johansson. Some of the costumes were designed by the duo of Bart and Kurt, who had previously worked in the wardrobe department for films such as Dallas Buyers Club and Hunger Games. These two, alongside Beta Workshop, created the costume of the main character, a ghost. One interesting fact is that when the designers were working in the costumes for some of the other characters, they drew inspiration from stylized versions of the future from science fiction movies from the 1970s. Throw in a little inspiration from the films of Stanley Kubrick and Voila. We have Ghost in the Shell. As for Scarlett Johansson, this was one of the most challenging roles for her career. The actress started training with a martial arts coach before work started on the movie and all, and spent over a year preparing for the film. The House with a Clock in Its Walls. The fantasy film based on John Bellaire's novel of the same name was released worldwide in September 2018. The plot of the film is that an orphan boy called Louis moves in with his uncle Jonathan. He then realizes that his uncle and their neighbor are wizards. They look for the ticking clock in Jonathan's house that, well, we won't spoil it for you. Jack Black plays Uncle Jonathan, and if you have never imagined the image of Jack Black's head on a baby, then, well, this film really has something you should see. This is all thanks to the amazing set designs and the work of talented artists and animators. The house full of magic and furniture that jumps around all over the place was not without its setbacks. One of the most difficult tasks for the team of visual effects specialists was to create huge gears in the clock room. In conclusion, this film is definitely worth a watch. Well, my friends, did you enjoy our look around famous movie sets? If you actually did, then please give it a like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. See you soon. Goodbye.